investors see opportunity where others saw risk and creating solutions that enable growth where it matters most. Because when confidence grows, investment follows. And when investment flows, opportunities multiply. Across sectors, across countries, across generations.
Today, ATIDI has evolved from a mere idea, from a risk perception changing institution to onboarding over 24 permanent African countries. The rest of the 26 African member countries are already preparing on
infrastructure, in thriving businesses, in expanded access to essential services, in jobs created, communities connected, essential services expanded, and futures transformed. These are not just projects, they are stories of progress, stories made possible through partnership.
As a bank, we were constrained on our capacity to be able to issue these guarantees. But through the support of ATIDI, we were able to arrange a total of $322 million of guarantees, both advance payment guarantees and performance guarantees. So we brought together 4 banks as a lead arranger. BPR was a lead arranger, but we also had the Development Bank of Rwanda, Bank of Kigali, as well as KCB Group. And we brought together the 4 banks, but got a lot of support from ATIDI that provided a de-risking mechanism for us to be able to issue those guarantees. And so we're really proud about the partnership with ATIDI, which enabled us to advance these. KCB Group, and we brought together the 4 banks that got a lot of support from ATIDI that provided a de-risking mechanism for us to be able to issue those guarantees. And so we're really proud about the partnership with ATIDI.
The next chapter has a name, ATIDI 2.0. Supported by continued partner commitment, expanding our footprint and deepening our impact across the continent. Enhanced products, responsive, agile, and built for the realities of today's markets. And a singular focus on what has always driven this organization, turning risk into opportunity. Because risk hasn't disappeared from Africa. It never does. In any market, in any continent, it has simply evolved. And so have we. ATIDI has the track record, the credibility, the stature, the tools to make sure that when investors look at Africa, they don't see a leap of faith. They see a bankable opportunity, investable opportunity.
25 years of partnership, 25 years of confidence, 25 years of impact, and the best is yet to come.
A big round of applause for those 25 remarkable years, which would not have been possible were it not for the founding member states. We'd like to take a moment to recognize and acknowledge the founding member states, Burundi, Kenya, Malawi, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia. Their early commitment helped create an African institution built to understand risk, manage it, and unlock trade and investment beyond what we could have imagined. In this moment, it is my absolute pleasure to invite to stage Mr. Manuel Moses, Chief Executive Officer of ATIDI, for his statement and presentation. The floor is yours, sir. A round of applause as he comes to stage.
As usual, the mic needs to be adjusted for height. Your Excellency, Professor Kithure Kindiki, the Vice President of the Republic of Kenya, representing His Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto, the President of Kenya. Your Excellency, Dr. Hassan Kibeya, Minister of Trade of the Republic of Burundi, representing His Excellency Evariste Ndayishimiye, the President of Burundi. Your Excellency, Ambassador Winnipeg Moyo, representing the President of Zimbabwe, Dr. Emmerson Mnangagwa. Honorable Ministers, members of the Diplomatic Corps, shareholders, the members of the Board of Directors of ATIDI, Dr. C.D. Uta, the President of the African Development Bank, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, good morning. Welcome to the ATIDI 26th Annual General Meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, this year the AGM is laden with symbols. It marks ATIDI's first Silver Jubilee, the beginning of the close of 25 years of our journey to catalyze investments and support economic emergence. The journey has been one of steady growth, performance, efficiency, and recognition. Focusing on growth, ATIDI was founded by 7 visionary African nations, which have just been mentioned by the previous speaker, including Kenya, that chose to invest in Africa's future at a time when much of the world focused on the continent's challenges rather than on its opportunities. Since then, our organization has grown to 24 countries, member countries, and 14 institutional shareholders today, representing European, African, American, and Asian stakeholders. I would like to take this opportunity to warmly welcome our newest member, shareholder, which is the KfW Development Bank of Germany, for its investment in ATIDI earlier this year, which was a significant vote of confidence in our organization, whilst creating opportunities to mobilize capital and deepen partnership and support investments across the continent. For the last 25 years, our performance has been driven by excellence to commitment, deepening understanding of our markets to serve an enduring partnership with our partners who are present in this room. Together, with our unique strengths, our preferred creator status, these qualities have enabled ATIDI to remain a trusted partner and a source of stability through the periods of both growth and uncertainty. Our performance reflects during this commitment that against the backdrop of the continent's global uncertainty and the lingering effects of the COVID pandemic, ATIDI delivered yet another year of resilient growth in 2025. With the strong results in insurance revenue and investment income and total equity, these achievements have further strengthened our ability to fulfill our mandate and to expand across the continent. This year's AGM will validate our results for 2025. I'm confident they will again highlight the steady progress towards the organization's ambitious goals and growing impact in transforming Africa. In 2025, ATIDI recorded strong financial performance with a total exposure of $9.2 billion, up from the $8.9 billion in 2025, and our profit rising by 20% to $71.4 million, and our total assets growing to $1.06 billion, and our total equity increasing by 12% to $883 million. Our performance is a product of continuous improvement and commitment to excellence. The determination to ensure that the highest standards are reflected in every solution we provide, in every transaction we do and support. Beyond our political and credit risk covers, we have carved out products that support critical sectors, including energy transition, cross-border trade, SME development, and support the AU's Agenda 2063, including, of course, implementation of the AfCFTA trade agreements. Our product, the RLSF, which some of you already know, we partnered with KfW, I think they're in the room somewhere, and NORAD, and the Norwegian Development Bank, to provide a liquidity support, which supports small renewable energy projects against risk of delayed payments by off-takers, making them more bankable and viable. These covers, which we call RLSF covers, have enabled 35 megawatts of development for the Menengai project, geothermal project here in Kenya. Beyond RLSF and others, we also did Lake Turkana project earlier on, and also Kipeto in the southern part of Nairobi. On cross-border trade, we are working closely with other DFIs, including Afreximbank, TDB, Comesa, ZEPRI, to introduce what we call the Regional Transport Guarantee Scheme, which also enables cross-border trade in a single guarantee that allows truckers to transition across the region. On SME financing, we are also rolling out portfolio guarantee that allows us to sit between banks and SMEs by providing banks the comfort they need to provide lending to SMEs. Our innovation translates into solutions for renewable and Sharia compliant products being allowed as to support Sharia and Muharaba financing. And this is starting. We've started already in Nigeria, starting to deploy a Sharia compliant insurance. So we are continuing to innovate. Ladies and gentlemen, beyond our efficient product lineup, ATIDI's success is anchored in unique assets that contribute to our stable excellence. One of them being the preferred creator status, which is fundamental to business model, which requires member states, and I'm appealing to you member states, to say when there is a declare, when there is a claim that ATIDI has paid, we urge you to honor the preferred creator status of ATIDI, because that is the confidence we give to our investors and our clients. I would like to seize the opportunity to salute all our member countries for saying, please honor your PCS to ATIDI for your own good. Ladies and gentlemen, as we close the chapter of the first 25 years, a few points stand out and they come to mind. ATIDI has demonstrated solutions that are often placed to address Africa's unique challenges and opportunities. We have built success on the ability to combine world-class standards with a deep understanding of African markets, designing solutions that reflect local realities whilst meeting the expectations of global investors. This level of expertise and unique features of guarantee mechanisms such as ATIDI are relevant and will be needed at scale. We are also relevant as ever. Indeed, our transversal role in Africa's development is uncontested and a light, simple evolution of the global risk perception. Risk is at our inception. It is still there. It is just there. It is evolving. Risk has not changed. It's just changing its nature. And ATIDI also is evolving with the risk to manage it on a daily basis. This recognition is echoed by the most influential voices in the development community, who are increasingly seeing the role of guarantees that they can play in unlocking investments and advancing Africa's ambitious economic development, and delivering on that needs effort. Your Excellency, Professor Kindiki, thank you for coming. Your Excellency, President Ruto and President Macron and the German Chancellor have been endorsing ATIDI. Thank you for the endorsement you did here at the Africa Forward Summit and also at the G7. Through you, you've elevated ATIDI's profile at the global scale. President Sidi, thank you also for your unwavering support. Your endorsement of ATIDI is a testament of the model and the promise that ATIDI provides. Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our next chapter, which is ATIDI 2.0, coined ATIDI 2.0 recently, it begins a pivotal moment for Africa. One where the continent is taking greater ownership of its destiny, reshaping its financial architecture to catalyze resources and scale up projects and impact to fuel Africa's economic emergency. This endeavor, which is led by the African Development Bank, we salute the bank's leadership for driving this paradigm shift from a donor-led financing to one where there's equal partnership between the investors and the continent. ATIDI is playing its part in that agenda, and we will spare no effort to support that agenda. The challenges ahead of us remain considerable, but so are also the opportunities across the continent. This growing momentum and stronger institutions are increasing the determination of Africa's future through African-led solutions. As part of the effort to bridge development financial gap, ATIDI is committed to transforming this momentum into an opportunity and measurable impact, helping to unlock the vast potential that Africa needs for its economic transformation. We will discuss this exciting perspective during this AGM and beyond. And thank you for being part of this vital deliberations, and we look forward to exchanging ideas with you for the next coming days, and the best is yet to come. So thank you so much for your kind attention, and all the best.
That was really the key phrase. Thank you so much, Mr. Moses, CEO, for outlining some of the key achievements that you've done. And really what stays with us is that the best is yet to come. This is movement towards enabling more domestic capital. And we're going to hear more from our chair of the board, Mr. Professor Kelly Moa Kingsley, chair of the board of ATIDI. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving him a big round of applause as he comes to stage. Thank you.
Thank you. As it's always the case after Manuel, the microphone has to be adjusted to size and not height. Professor Kindiki, Vice President of Kenya, I want to stand on the established protocol by Manuel Moses. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great privilege to welcome you to the 26th Annual General Meeting of ATIDI, to address you at this particular significant moment in our institution's history. As we celebrate at our Silver Jubilee, this year 2026 rather, marks 25 years since the establishment of ATIDI. It is an occasion to celebrate our achievements, honor the vision and leadership of those who laid the foundation of this institution. And it is a moment to reflect on the lessons that continue to shape our journey. For me, one lesson stands out above all. When people ask me what I believe in Africa is Africa's greatest asset, some will say our critical minerals. Others will point to our youthful population, our fertile lands, our strategic location, or our immense renewable energy potential. All of these are extraordinary advantages. Yet, after many years in public finance, international financial markets, I have come to a different conclusion. Africa's greatest asset is confidence. Because when people believe in a country's future, they invest. When investors believe, businesses grow. When businesses grow, jobs are created. And when jobs are created, families prosper and nations flourish. 25 years ago, the founders of ATIDI understood this simple but powerful truth. They recognized that Africa's development challenges would not be solved by capital alone. Capital follows confidence. They understood that our continent needed institutions capable of understanding Africa's realities, mitigating risk, strengthening investors' confidence, and unlocking opportunities in ways that reflect the aspirations of our countries and the countries they serve. That vision gave birth to ATIDI. Over the past quarter century, ATIDI has demonstrated the strength of that vision. What began as an ambitious African initiative has become one of the continent's most respected multilateral financial institutions. Together with our member states, shareholders and partners, we have helped mobilize billions of dollars in trade and investments while strengthening economic resilience across Africa. We have shown that institutions built by Africa for Africa can meet the highest international standards while remaining firmly rooted in our continent's needs. We have shown that Africa is stronger and powerful when it depends solely on its context, its needs, rooted in its foundation. There is an African proverb that says, wisdom is like a baobab tree. No one individual can embrace it all alone. ATIDI is a testament to that wisdom. Our success has never belonged to one country, one shareholder, or one institution. It has always been the product of partnership, shared purpose, and collective responsibility. And today, with the shared vision of the African Development Bank that has boosted and projected and taken our vision to a higher height, Africa has a reason to dream. Ladies and gentlemen, the world we operate in today is rapidly changing. Global capital is becoming more selective. Supply chains are being reconfigured. Artificial intelligence is transforming industries. Climate change is reshaping investment priorities. Geopolitical developments are redefining economic relationships and creating new centers of growth. At the same time, Africa's importance to the global economy has never been greater. By 2050, 1 in every 4 people in the world will be African. Our continent holds approximately 30% of the world's known critical mineral reserves, possesses vast renewable energy resources, and is home to one of the world's fastest growing consumer markets. Yet Africa still faces an infrastructure financing gap estimated at between US 100 billion and US 100 billion and US 170 billion annually. These figures should not be seen as a measure of Africa's challenge alone. They are a measure of Africa's opportunity. In this environment, institutions such as ours have an increasingly important role to play. Our responsibility is not simply to support transactions, it is to strengthen the confidence, to reduce barriers to investment, to help create the conditions in which businesses can grow, economies can prosper, and development ambitions can become a reality. People often describe ATIDI as a risk mitigating institution. True, of course. Others describe us as a guarantor. That is equally true. But I believe our purpose is even greater. We are in the business of building confidence. Our guarantees are the instrument. Confidence is the outcome. And sustainable development is the ultimate impact. It is therefore encouraging that this model is increasingly recognized beyond our continent. We are honored to see ATIDI referenced by His Excellency President William Ruto during the G7 summit and acknowledged in the G7 summit leaders' declaration on mutually beneficial international partnerships. We welcome this recognition with humility, not simply because it celebrates ATIDI, but because it reflects growing confidence in African institutions and African-led solutions. As another African proverb reminds us, rain does not fall on one roof alone. The opportunities before Africa and indeed the responsibilities they bring belong to all of us. As a board, we are proud of what ATIDI has achieved over the past 25 years. But anniversaries are not only moments for reflection, they are moments for renewal. The next chapter of our journey will require us to continue innovating, strengthening our financial resilience, and responding to the evolving needs of member states and stakeholders. It will require us to preserve the trust we have earned while agile in a world that is changing faster than ever before. The discussions we begin during this annual General Assembly are therefore about much more than governance. They are about positioning ATIDI for the future and ensuring that we continue to make a meaningful contribution to Africa's economic transformation for decades to come. Before I conclude, allow me to express my sincere gratitude to our shareholders for your continued trust and commitment. I thank my fellow board members for their stewardship and guidance, and commend our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Manuel Moses, and the team, together with the entire staff of ATIDI, for their dedication, professionalism, and unwavering commitments to our shared vision. Ladies and gentlemen, 25 years ago, ATIDI was founded on a belief that African solutions could unlock African opportunities. Today, that belief has become an institution respected around the world. Tomorrow, it must become an even stronger catalyst for transformation. Let us therefore use this anniversary not simply to celebrate what we have achieved, but to renew our commitment to what is still possible. Because development begins with confidence. Confidence inspires investments. Investments create opportunity, and opportunity changes lives. Confidence remains Africa's most valuable asset. Thank you all for having answered the call, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Chair Kingsley. As we proceed, we would like to share with you that we have translation headsets available for you. You will find English on channel 1 and French on channel 5. Avant de procéder, nous voulons partager avec vous que nous avons des casques de traduction. Vous trouverez sur le numéro 1 la chaîne en anglais et sur le 5 en français. Now, as we proceed, it is my distinct honor to welcome to stage for remarks His Excellency Erastus Mwencha, former African Union Deputy Chair and COMESA Secretary General. Let's give him a very warm round of applause as he comes to stage.
It is my singular honor this morning to see this hall full, but also to see so many distinguished leaders from across the world. And so I'm overwhelmed because my role is simply just to take you to the beginning. Your Excellency, Deputy President Professor Kithure Kindiki, may I also recognize the President of the African Development Bank, various honorable ministers, those representing heads of state and government, my dear brother, President of Trade and Development Bank, my brother Emmanuel. I am simply honored and privileged to share this joy that I have this morning, just to take you to the beginning. At the turn of the millennium, the world looked at Africa and saw a prohibitive risk. ATIDI was born out of a bold aspiration within COMESA to support investors courageous enough to engage a continent then unfairly duped as hopeless. The entire continent then attracted a pantry 17 billion in foreign direct investment. Today, we celebrate 25 years of proving the skeptics wrong, having unlocked over 93 billion in trade and investment across our continent. This financial powerhouse did not just emerge overnight. The spark originated with the COMESA clearinghouse. When this concept was brought to us during my tenure as Secretary General of COMESA, the underlying philosophy was clear. Africans are best placed to manage African risk. We took the proposals to the COMESA Council of Ministers, then directly to the heads of state and government. It was not easy. Back then, and I believe it is the case now, the idea of political risk was not well understood. But through that persistent and encouragement, the political will was solidified and a historic launch took place in the year 2001 under the stewardship of President Yoweri Museveni, who hosted that first ATIDI, and ATIDI then was born. ATIDI now has blossomed from just a baby to become a prime development insurer. African member states lacked the immediate capital to fund the required liquidity. So a central banking architecture came into action to navigate meager. And I should say here that when we approached the World Bank, and of course the World Bank group, MEGA is one of the institutions which is part of the World Bank. MEGA felt that ATIDI could not be supported because ATIDI was going to be in the same environment where MEGA plays, and that is providing political risk. And so to navigate that scenario, we persuaded the World Bank to give us resources just simply to stay within the context of trade. And that's why the original name of ATIDI was ATI, Africa Trade Insurance Agency. But when we started operations, it was clear from the market that that product was not viable. So we had to go back to the World Bank and convince the World Bank together with MEGA that they allow us just to write risks, investment risks of short term, of at least below 10 years. And so they agreed. And we managed then to acquire more products for ATIDI. And so the COMESA Council of Ministers and governors of central banks then went back to the World Bank because the member states didn't even have the capital to be able to start a seed capital for ATIDI. And so we managed, together with the World Bank, to secure IDA credit. And that was not also easy, particularly to convince the rest of the world to give us an IDA credit so that we could start. And as, of course, the story now goes, when we secured that credit, that brought credibility. and others then followed. The African Development Bank was one of those that came in very strongly, followed for the Trade and Development Bank, SEBRI and others, and many other institutions and came in, Menukiri and the others. I tell this story because lest we forget where we have come from. Sometimes it's good to remember the journey that we have traveled today here. I had the privilege of steering the ship as interim managing director while I was still holding my portfolio as Secretary General of Commerce. And during that time, with the strong support that we got from the World Bank, we laid the firm foundation of operational frameworks that kept our mandate tethered to the African Industrial Association that we had embarked on to support. We went to the Lloyd's market to recruit a managing director who replaced me. And the reason we did that was to bring expertise, but also confidence to the rest of the world. Thereafter, we turned to MIGA, who gave us another managing director. And thereafter, we also went to Africa Re. This was done consciously in order to institutionalize the multilateral character of ATI. An institution, as you know, is as good as its leaders. This intentional succession transformed ATI from a regional initiative into a globally respected credit and political risk insurer. May I use this occasion to present our deep appreciation, particularly to Moses, my brother Manuel Moses, who also came to us with experience from IFC, for his leadership and for taking ATIDI to a new level. As it has been said here before, in mid-2023, ATI rebranded to ATIDI, signaling maturity into a truly Pan-African institution. Today, ATIDI is a respected, highly credible player, posting solid results as we have seen from the MD this morning. ATIDI has also been, as you have been told, expanded from 7 founding members of COMESA nation into a coalition of 24 African member states alongside global partners such as the Export and Import Bank of India, Germans, KfW, and the rest, as you have been told. And one of perhaps biggest assets, as it has been pointed out this morning, is for ATIDI maintaining a stable rating from Standard & Poor's and also A2 from Moody's, and thus leveraging on this advantage, making it possible for ATIDI that for every $1 that ATIDI is able to secure, this alone can be multiplied 10 times, and thus bringing in more capital into a region. Within COMESA itself, ATIDI has covered over 1,200 transactions representing over 38 billion of investment in agriculture, in infrastructure, in telecommunications, transport, and financial services. ATIDI portfolio includes modernizing. I heard there is a minister from Burundi representing His Excellency the President. You may wish to know that the Burundi brewery is one of those projects supported by ATIDI. But also, I don't know whether we have a representative from Ethiopia. The Ethiopian airline, one of the best airlines in the world, is one of those that ATIDI has invested in. And also, just to mention some of the sectors, how deep down ATIDI has been, is to providing clean water to the people in Angola. In Kenya, our historic host carries the largest net exposure of over 1 billion in domestic investments, including green energy and the financial sector. The question I want to ask this morning, should the persistence of risk in Africa worry us today, as it did then at the turn of the century? The answer is emphatically no. Risk is inherent to every business decision and business unusual. This is, as it has been stated here, become a new global norm. Because of the institution of Bedlock built over 25 years, global investors no longer need a blind leap of faith to deploy capital in Africa. ATIDI is now endorsed at the highest levels as essential to reforming Africa's financial architecture. We salute the FDP president for the new African financial architecture, NAFAD, which identifies risk guarantees as primary pillar of attracting investment to the region at an unprecedented scale. Let me now, as I conclude, just have a small view to the future. Yes, we have spent 25 years, but the next 25 years, as it was in 25 years ago, the world called ensuring trade and investment in Africa an unsustainable gamble. Together, we provided that managing African risk is among the most secure, counter-cyclical, and lucrative investment in the global economy. In other words, we changed what was then a risk to an investment opportunity. As we step into the next chapter, let us collectively work to achieve and maintain ATIDI's preferred credit status, because this is a critical asset that we have and we should not let it go. And I think the MD has made a plea this morning about it. Thank you to everyone who held a pen to draft our founding treaties, and it's complex, by the way. Everyone who sat in those tough negotiations, in the negotiation rooms of the World Bank, and millions of entrepreneurs whose bold dreams we secure every day. To the government of Kenya, thank you for your steadfast support and unwavering commitment to ATIDI. In fact, the government of Kenya gave us accommodation right from day one, when we didn't even have a place where to go, and has remained so. We salute His Excellency the President, William Samoei Ruto, for his strong advocacy for ATIDI at the African Forward Summit and the G7 Summit, and his generous donation of land for the development of ATIDI's permanent headquarters. To the African Development Bank and the government of Kenya, thank you for your continued commitment to strengthening ATIDI through the enhanced shareholding. To African member states, thank you for the trust and confidence that has enabled ATIDI to grow into one of Africa's leading multilateral providers of investment and trade solutions. The future of ATIDI lies not only in mitigating risk, but in mobilizing private capital at scale while systematically reducing sovereign exposure, enabling member governments to protect their national debt ceilings, while we help bridge Africa's first infrastructure and development financing gap. ATIDI, together with other continental financial institutions, constitute a critical mass that will spur the development of Africa Continental Free Trade Area and also Agenda 23 aspirations. With continued support of AU member states, shareholder, development partners, and private sector investors, ATIDI will remain a trusted partner in shaping Africa's economic future. Long live ATIDI, and may we continue to rise together. Thank you for your kind audience.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We will now be joined, and it is my absolute honor to welcome to stage Dr. Chris Kipto, CBS Permanent Secretary at the National Treasury and Economic Planning for the Republic of Kenya, representing FCPA Honorable John Mbadi Dongo, Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Economic Planning for the Republic of Kenya. A round of applause as he comes to stage.
Professor Abraham Kithure Kindiki, the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, and our chief guest this morning, Honorable Ministers of Finance from ATIDI member states, all distinguished shareholders led by President Sidi Ta of the Africa Development Bank, and may I write on all the already established protocol. I am here to speak on behalf of my minister, John Mbadi, who, due to unforeseen circumstances, could not join us this morning. So, may I say good morning to everyone. Habari zenu. It's with great pleasure and honor to welcome you on behalf of the government of Kenya to Nairobi for the 2026 annual general meeting of the ATIDI. Ladies and gentlemen, the 26th annual general meeting of ATIDI comes at a moment of particular significance for both our institution and our continent. We meet at a time when the global economy continues to navigate a complex landscape characterized by geopolitical tensions, trade fragmentation, climate-related disruptions involving financial conditions, and heightened uncertainty in capital markets. Despite these challenges, African economies continue to demonstrate resilience and determination in pursuing sustainable growth and structural transformation. Across the continent, governments are undertaking strategic reforms aimed at strengthening macroeconomic stability, improving fiscal sustainability, expanding domestic resource mobilization, and creating an enabling environment for private investment. Above all, our economies are putting appropriate measures to uplift the living standards of our citizens, as this is the ultimate goal of each of our governments. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya's economy has similarly remained resilient. Our growth over the last 5 years has been averaging 5%, supported by favorable weather conditions, strong agricultural performance, continued expansion in services, climate-smart investments, and ongoing implementation of government's development priorities. And I will skip a number of variables that are in this speech just to save time. But I just want to say that I'm proud to inform that ATIDI's engagement in Kenya, just like other member states, closely complements the country's long-term economic transformation priorities. The government's development strategy is increasingly focused on unlocking private sector-led growth through investments in productive sectors. Achieving transformation in our nations and in the continent at large requires all of us to pursue not only our sound economic management, but also innovative mechanisms capable of reducing investment risks and improving investment environment. In this regard, institutions such as ATIDI are becoming indispensable partners in bridging the gap between investment opportunities and available capital. By mitigating political, sovereign, and commercial risks, ATIDI enables both domestic and international investors to participate more confidently in projects that generate employment, expand productive capacity, and generate employment and strengthen economic competitiveness. ATIDI continues to work closely with the government of Kenya on a number of strategic initiatives aimed at deepening investment flows and strengthening financial resilience. The collaboration is increasingly focused on practical and high-impact areas that directly support Kenya's development financing agenda. This includes support for sovereign liquidity and liability management operations to enhance fiscal sustainability, the expansion of public-private partnerships, and privatization frameworks to mobilize private capital into infrastructure and service delivery. The advancement of renewable energy financing, particularly geothermal development projects such as Menengai under structured risk-sharing facilities, and the development of SME guarantee frameworks in collaboration with the National Treasury and the Central Bank of Kenya to expand access to finance and strengthen credit markets. I want to confirm that the rest of what is in the speech of the minister is going to be spoken more in the speech by the Deputy President. So in order to save time, I will stop here. Thank you very much. So I have been asked to now take this opportunity to invite His Excellency, the Deputy President of Kenya, Professor Kithure Kindiki. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Good morning, please be seated. Sorry, Chris, you have had to interrupt your speech. Good morning. I am also standing in for the President of Kenya, William Ruto, therefore my remarks will be shorter than he would have spoken, but I'll still say the highlights of what he would have spoken if he was here today. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and all the dignitaries present, I am very happy to be part of this very important gathering, the 26th AGM of ATIDI. On behalf of William Ruto, the President of Kenya, I welcome heads of delegation, ministers, shareholders, development partners, members of the diplomatic corps, and all the other guests. Karibuni sana Nairobi. This gathering is not just the 26th AGM, it's also the silver jubilee for this very important institution for our continent. Kenya is honored to be associated with this milestone. And as we have heard from Erastus Mwencha, former Deputy AU Commission Chair, this journey started a quarter century ago when some visionaries thought that it was time to not only write our own story ourselves, but also to tell it. And to tell it not by saying, but by doing. And that is how this great institution was founded. Today, that vision has become a remarkable African success story. ATIDI has evolved into one of the continent's most credible multilateral financial institutions, providing innovative risk mitigation solutions that strengthen investor confidence, facilitate trade, and catalyze sustainable development. I associate with the sentiment of the chair of the ATIDI board when he just told us that beyond the assets of this continent that we repeatedly acclaim, namely a youthful population, arable land, natural resources, strategic location of the continent, and a huge potential for renewable energies resources beyond those 5 assets. The asset of confidence in our continent is perhaps much more greater than the resources and the advantages that we have. Africa stands at a defining moment in its development journey. We are progressively moving forward from dependence on externally driven development models towards greater self-reliance, stronger regional integration, and African-led financing institutions. Institutions such as ATIDI are central to this transformation because sustainable development requires confidence, confidence requires predictable institutions, and investment thrives where risk is effectively managed. As you are aware, President William Ruto has been one of the leaders of this continent who have been very clear that going forward, we must not only push for the reform of the global financial architecture, but we must also create African regional financial architecture that underwrites African development, not only in terms of mobilizing resources, but also being able to underwrite risk and be able to give confidence to investors. Ladies and gentlemen, ATIDI continues to demonstrate that de-risking investment is one of the most effective ways of attracting long-term capital investment into African economies. Over the last 25 years, the institution has facilitated billions of dollars in trade and investment across the continent, while supporting governments and businesses to navigate political, commercial, and sovereign risks. That has benefited this continent. Kenya has benefited as well from its partnership with ATIDI. Over the past 2 years alone, ATIDI has facilitated $960 million in trade and investment in this country. And I'm sure the story is the same for many of our other countries represented here. Cumulatively, ATIDI has supported investments across energy, transport, manufacturing, financial services, agriculture, and even infrastructure amounting to $7 billion. Flagship projects, just to mention a few for this country, and I'm sure there are many in your own countries. In this country, some of the flagship projects supported by ATIDI include the Lake Turkana Wind Power Project, the Kipeto Wind Power Project, the Menengai Geothermal Development Project, and all these projects cumulatively have been able to deliver or will be delivering 500,000 households, will be delivering clean energy to over 500,000 households in this country. Kenyan households, and this demonstrates how solutions generated on this continent can transform our continent. I also want to mention that the government of Kenya believes in transforming society from the bottom of the economic pyramid upwards, the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, which recognizes that public resources alone cannot finance our development aspirations. We therefore continue to strengthen the investment climate so that we can attract private resources to help us transform our society faster and better. We continue to strengthen the investment climate by maintaining macroeconomic stability, implementing regulatory reforms, expanding infrastructure, supporting enterprise development, and deepening regional trade integration. Looking ahead, Africa must continue strengthening its own financial architecture, greater collaboration among African multilateral financial institutions, stronger regional guarantee mechanisms, and innovative financing solutions will enable our countries to mobilize affordable capital while reducing dependence on financing. Kenya, therefore, welcomes ongoing efforts to establish stronger continental guarantee mechanisms under African leadership. Such initiatives will complement existing institutions, expand investor confidence, and accelerate the implementation of transformational projects across our continent. The future belongs to a continent that believes in itself, invests in its institutions, and creates an enabling environment for enterprise to flourish. ATIDI embodies these values and demonstrates that African institutions can deliver world-class solutions to African challenges. As member states and shareholders, let us continue to strengthen ATIDI through sustained commitment, adequate capitalization, and strategic partnerships. I'm grateful to the ADB. I am told you've multiplied your stake in this institution 5 times. President, we thank you for that investment and that vote of confidence in our own, one of our own institutions. Together we can unlock greater investment, create jobs, expand intra-African trade, and improve the lives of our people. Kenya reaffirms its unwavering commitment to working with ATIDI and all member states to build resilient economies that are competitive, inclusive, and sustainable. I thank the board, management, shareholders, and development partners for their steadfast support over the past 25 years, and hope that through this AGM, we are going to figure out how we navigate the future in increasingly uncertain world, as because of the geopolitical and other variables that come into play in this point in time. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, as we look into the future, we must carry the people of Africa alongside with us. We must deliberately be inclusive, include women, include the young people of our continent as we look for solutions that transform the critical sectors of our economies. Into the future, we must create an environment that promotes and gives confidence to investments, and we must believe in our continent. Into the future, we must also be able, for those of us who are in political leadership, ensure long-term stability as one of the variables that are able to help ATIDI and other institutions to achieve the very noble objectives that they have for our continent. And looking into the future also, for policymakers, we must ensure policy continuity, because in the past, this continent has suffered from policy disruption, lack of continuity. You have a program that runs for a while. When there is change in leadership, that program is disrupted without any economic considerations. So those are some of the things that we must look at and ensure that we support as member states. We support ATIDI and the business community to be able to help us navigate the future as a continent. Thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to declare the 26th AGM of the African Trade and Investment Development Insurance Agency insurance officially open. Thank you very much, and God bless Africa.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for those poignant remarks. As we prepare the stage to be set up for our panel discussion, we'd like to invite you to turn your attention to the screen to watch a short video about ATIDI's 25-year timeline and our important milestones. And we are back for our Fireside Chat Leaders panel. Now, across Africa, governments are working hard to accelerate industrialization, expand energy access, value chains, support SMEs, and build climate-resilient infrastructure. All of this requires capital, not just more capital, but capital that is affordable, patient, and able to move into projects at scale. Today's conversation is about how Africa, our continent, can get there by strengthening African financial institutions, deepening domestic capital markets, reducing investment risks, and building stronger partnerships between governments, institutions, multilateral development banks, and specialized institutions like ATIDI. We look at how African-led solutions can help improve bankability, crowd in private investments, and support the continent's long-term transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming my panelists. His Excellency, Professor Kithure Kindiki, Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, representing His Excellency William Ruto. A round of applause as he joins the stage. Dr. Sidi Utta, President of the African Development Bank. Please welcome to stage. And Mr. Manuel Moses, CEO of ATIDI. Another round of applause. As we commence this conversation, I would like to start off, firstly, Your Excellency, by thanking the government of Kenya for hosting us here in Nairobi and for also being the long-standing supporter of ATIDI and other African financial institutions. Last night, President Ruto made a very clear point. Africa does not suffer from a lack of capital or opportunity. The challenge is how we organize that capital, how we organize our own resources, strengthen our institutions, and finance Africa's development on African terms, terms that reflect the continent's real potential. So my first question is addressed to you, Your Excellency. Before we get into the financing architecture, let us start with the real economy. What are Kenya's industrial priorities?
Thank you very much. Kenya's industrial priorities are anchored on the transformation of agriculture first, to provide the necessary raw materials for a value addition program that can generate manufacturing anchored around agriculture, as well as other secondary sectors. Number two, Kenya believes that for the transformation of the primary productive sector to be able to give us enough raw materials for value addition and industrialization, we need adequate supplies of climate-friendly energy. And number three, we need reliable water for irrigation and industrial use. So for us, our industrial transformation plan revolves around the transformation of the transformation of the primary sector, starting with agriculture. Secondly, taking the baby steps of aggregation, value addition and manufacturing. But for that to happen, we believe in two enablers. One is energy, and that energy must be clean and renewable. And number two, we believe in adequate water. So water harvesting, water storage for irrigation will help us drive our industrialization into the future.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Very clear objectives and enablers, which demonstrates the clarity of vision that the government has. President, bringing you into the conversation, the Deputy President has laid out the kind of transformation that the country is seeking. But across the continent, one of the biggest questions is whether Africa has the financial architecture to support that kind of ambition at scale. NAFAD, the New African Finance and Development Architecture, nicknamed as your baby, speaks directly to that challenge. We've heard that Africa holds nearly $4 trillion in long-term domestic capital, yet still faces an annual financing gap of more than $400 billion. So the issue isn't really whether the capital exists, but it rather is in how it is organized, de-risked, and connected to investable opportunities. So I'd like you to tell us more. What are the key pillars of the new African finance and development architecture, and how is it different?
Thank you very much. Let me at the outset commend the leadership of President William Ruto, who has been really very supportive to the new African financial architecture and always supporting African financial institutions. So the new African financial architecture for development, NAFAD, is meant really to respond to a dear need among African countries, really to fight fragmentation. We do have in Africa the largest number of financial institution and development finance institution in the world, but yet the consolidated balance sheet of these institutions represent only 1% of the development finance institution in the world. That shows the level of fragmentation we have and also the low level of capitalization we have in our financial institution. This is why at the African Development Bank, as the premier financial institution in the continent, the only AAA rated institution in the continent, we felt that we should work with all our financial institutions and all the partners of Africa to establish this new African financial architecture. Because as mentioned last night by President William Ruto, before we wait for the international financial architecture to be adjusted to take into consideration African interest, we need really to do it at the regional level. And the new African financial architecture can be seen vertically as in three layers. So the continental layer, the regional layer, and the national layer. But also horizontally, it includes all the DFIs, the commercial banks, the guarantee fund, the insurance, reinsurance, private equity funds, pension funds, national wealth funds, stock market, and other players. So the new African financial architecture works through 4 principles. The first principle is subsidiarity. So African Development Bank should not engage in operation which can be handled by the National Development Bank or the Regional Development Bank. Each institution should tackle the level of intervention it is the most appropriate institution to tackle. The second principle is a principle of coordination. We should not work in silos. We should work as one system and we should coordinate together. The third principle is a principle of complementarity. So we should work to complement each other and join our forces to deliver integrated solution for the continent. And the fourth principle is risk transformation. And this is where ATIDI is the key element of the system. Because what we lack in the continent is not resources, as you rightly mentioned, but is how we can channel those resources to fund our development. We are sitting on trillions of savings across the continent, but this trillion cannot be channeled to finance our development unless we have the confidence ATIDI can provide us.
Thank you very much for providing those insights. I'd like to come back to some of the points that you've made, but before that, the demonstration is in the fact that you have actually increased your shareholding in ATIDI, with NAFAD now being the principal architecting body overseeing that. The overall vision, the high-level objectives, and the need for Africa to build a more coordinated financing system. Now, where my curiosity leads me, and my next question is directed to you, Mr. Moses, is how will the AFDB's $125 million investment into ATIDI impact infrastructure and investment projects across the continent? What will this look like?
No, thank you very much for having me. Let me start by saying the model that you've been hearing about ATIDI is about giving confidence to investors. Okay, so if we give confidence to investors, we can bring those enterprises that value add, as already said by the Vice President. We can work with investors to build the infrastructure that takes the raw materials where they are being produced and manufactured. So ultimately, an economy will grow when businesses grow. Now, businesses grow when they are confident. And it's been mentioned already by the Vice President that there's policies that governments put in, and governments need to honor those policies. However, as we all know, sometimes it doesn't happen. Policies change, and projects get stranded. Now, if you were an investor, you had put your money in a 25-year project, and assuming that the policies that the government have provided for you will stay for 25 years. But 5 years later, there's a change of policy. Where does the investor go? The investor struggles. This is the idea behind ATIDI, to give confidence. And we have proved for the last 25 years that when we bring that consistency, when we bring that policy consistency, we say, okay, the government messed you up, we will make you whole so that you can make the confidence investments flow. So from 2001 up to 2026, we have seen a cumulative amount of $93 billion being mobilized. Now, $93 billion for an institution which is nearly $1 billion in capital, how do you achieve that? It's impossible. But when you analyze it, you realize that ATIDI has been a very efficient mobilizer of private capital. This is why President Sidi realized that, okay, when you look at all the champions that could actually achieve the ambition of Africa, we need efficient vehicles. Yeah? Would you drive a Ferrari or would you drive a Peugeot? Those kind of discussions. So we are really the first efficient mobilizer of confidence. Every dollar that we get from investors, we are able to multiply it up to 10 times, thanks to reinsurers partners in this room. These are the people that make it possible. Now, that $125 million that the president graciously gave us, and thank you, we are able to multiply it 10 times. So that translates to an additional 1.25 billion annually. So you can imagine after 5 years, that could be what? 5.5 billion. You do the maths. So you can imagine the impact. This is the core. This is the reason why we are saying the more capital we get, the better we can organize and mobilize investments by de-risking capital that is already in here. That is the other side of the role that ATIDI plays. How do you convince a pension fund to put money in an infrastructure project that might be cancelled? So pension funds need a strong institution to say, yes, in case that power purchase agreement or concession is cancelled, ATIDI, which is highly rated, will come through for you so that you can pay your pensioners. That is the promise. So really, I would say to the Vice President, if governments could be consistent in their policies, we don't need ATIDI. Investors will be confident. That's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moses. Now, coming back to you, Deputy President, Your Excellency, you outlined earlier some of your industrial priorities. Now, we've heard that the credit is available, that we have strong institutions like ATIDI mobilizing capital. I'd like to know from a government perspective, how are you creating an enabling environment for capital to be able to move towards you?
Thank you very much. Maybe as I spoke about agriculture, energy, and water, I left out trade and logistics, which is a very important addition to the whole industrialization matrix. And in this country, we have that component as well. We're mobilizing resources to modernize our roads and airports and seaports and so forth. But to answer your second question on what we are doing to create enabling environment for investor confidence, one, I spoke about policy continuity, because one of the biggest problems for Africa and much of the developing world is policy disruption, where it is not clear that a program on infrastructure transformation, a program on housing, a program on energy will be sustained in the long term. Many of the investors want long-term commitment that they can invest in a long-term project, especially the pension funds, which Moses has mentioned. So we are assuring, we are developing long-term policy positions that we hope can sustain this country for a generation plus. And we are also trying to mobilize our own resources so that as we invite investors to put their money in, for example, some of the roads we are dueling, we are also putting our local resources there so that we are joint partners. I said in the opening remarks that part of our moving into the future will involve making sure that we bridge the gap between public and private capital, because the public sector doesn't have enough resources to undertake some of the ambitions that we have. So that money will have to come from private investments. But in the past, there has been a dichotomy. That dichotomy must be bridged so that going forward, we can invest together in a project. It doesn't have to be either or. We should be doing that jointly, and that partnership should be able to assure some of the investors who are looking for long-term solutions. We are doing that already. We've started with some of the dual carriageways we are doing presently, and now I think this week we'll be beginning with the modernization of our main airport here, using a PPP model, putting money, public resources, and then bringing in investments. And we are also working on our other fundamentals to ensure that the policy interventions we are making will outlive a particular administration, because without that we will not be able to achieve what we want to.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And that really speaks to the earlier point that we heard from President Ta on the importance of harmonization, coordination, division of responsibility in moving forward towards a common architecture for financial institutions. Now, going back to your earlier point, President Ta, what are the next steps for NAFAD?
Thank you very much. So the first phase of the NAFAD is the recapitalization of ATIDI and also the enlargement of its shareholders. So we are really very keen to see all African countries joining ATIDI in the next coming month and years. But also the recapitalization of ATIDI will include also the contribution of African financial institutions. And we are thankful are very grateful to our partners outside the continent. Germany has recently joined ATIDI and became the largest non-regional member of ATIDI. We thank also Japan, who through NEXI has been also one of the non-regional members. We thank also Spain and Italy, UK through UKF, but we are expecting other non-regional members to join. On the African side, the recapitalization also will help the bank will help ATIDI to have a stronger capital base. And in that regard, we are working with the management of ATIDI and with our partners to mobilize resources to help our countries to pay for their contribution in the capital of ATIDI, either for existing members to increase their participation, but also for non-members to join and to pay for their contribution. So of course, NAFAD is a whole system, and part of the new initiative we are also working on is to work with the African Pension Fund to mobilize more resources to fund African development, to work with insurance and reinsurance industry also to mobilize some of the resources, to work with African sovereign funds to mobilize investment for the development of the continent, to work with capital market to deepen their market, but also to get them to work together toward a Pan-African stock exchange, because our market individually are very small. So we need really to link all African stock market to have a continental stock market. We do have also some initiative related to, for instance, recapitalization of all African DFIs, mobilizing resources at scale to recapitalize all African DFIs, and also to develop mechanism for domestic resource mobilization. So one of the initiatives we are working on is what we call the NAFAD multiplier, which will enable us through injection of capital to regional and to national to enable them to raise funds in their regional and domestic markets.
Excellent. It sounds like you have a bold, ambitious, but quite a lot of work on hand, but very important for our continent. And now, taking your earlier point, Mr. Moses, and in fact, looking at some of the points that have been discussed already on the panel, $93 billion is not a small number by any means of the imagination. But we have to look at the cost of that capital. How are you working, and how are some of the products that you've rolled out working towards lowering the cost of capital for the projects?
Well, thank you very much. In fact, that's another pillar of what ATIDI does. It's not just giving confidence, but also helping in lowering the cost of capital. How do we do that? You can imagine investors, local and international, always refer to the country's credit rating, okay? Let's use, most of our countries in the continent are rated in the B range, yeah? B, B plus, double B maybe. That's the majority of our countries. So when an investor looks at that, they say, if I have to do an investment in country Y, my risk premium is X, just from the rating. Of course, in Africa, they even add another premium. We call it the bias premium, yeah? So it's not just the rating premium, but also the bias premium. So that 2%, which was the implied risk premium, there's another bias premium of another 1%, it adds up at 3%. So automatically, any project in Africa is got a cost of doing business of 3%, okay? Now, what did ATIDI do to try and solve that? ATIDI said, okay, we need to also get the rating as an institution. And as you saw in our timeline, since 2008, ATIDI attained a rating of A by S&P and A3 by Moody's. And I think Moody's improved it in 2024 to A2. So really, we are investment grade. Now, So to the investor, if they see an investment grade protection for an investor, they are now looking at that country plus the cover from ATIDI. So the blended rating is now investment grade. So rightly so, you should ask the investor, surely an A-rated investor, what is their premium? Oh, they tell you 1%. So you see, we were supposed to pay 3%. Just because of our protection, they're charging 1%. That's how we reduce the cost of doing business for our countries. So indeed, investors can make an equivalent to say, okay, an A-rated institution in Europe or America or wherever, it's the same as in Africa. So we've made Africa investment grade. That's how we reduce the risk of cost of doing business in ATIDI, and we want to do it at scale. There's no magic to it, it's just the same. Let's play the game that the investors play, but do it fairly and demand that why should you still charge a higher rate for an investment grade?
Your industrial priorities, and where is there room to grow?
The room to grow is in optimizing the resources that have been mobilized to give us value for money. And I think for us, we are investing as a country in governance so that to make sure that the resources mobilized give not only a good return for investment for the investors, but also they are able to help us maximize on the public goods that we require to deliver to be able to transform our economy. So what we've done, for example, around the area of trade and logistics and infrastructure is to make sure that we establish a national infrastructure fund that is governed separately from our normal budget operations, and I think we're in the tail end of operationalizing a very business-friendly, investor-friendly government.
So as you know, MDBs has this particularity of being only to leverage based on their rating, but also through the capital adequacy reform, also to introduce what we call the hybrid capital. And the hybrid capital enable the MDBs to add a new way of leveraging. And we intend at the African Development Bank. So the African Development Bank, by the way, was the first MDB in the world to launch hybrid capital in the global capital market. That was in 2025. But our intention now is really to go at scale, not only for our own hybrid capital, but also for African DFI's hybrid capital. So we'll work, for instance, with other institutions to support their hybrid capital and also to support the hybrid capital of ATIDI and other institutions. That will really create a new possibility for African financial institutions, not only to increase their capital base, but also to be able to leverage more in the global capital market, but also in the regional and domestic capital markets. Besides that, the role of MDBs also is to support countries to do reforms, and reforms are quite important to create the enabling environment for investors to invest in African countries. Because our aim also is not only to leverage on the 4 trillion African savings, but also to attract some of the 100 trillions of global saving, which are not coming to Africa so far. So we want to attract a part of that. And for that, we need really to have strong institutions, to have the rule of law in Africa, and also to make sure that we do have enabling investment environments.
Thank you very much, President Tao. Now, your point is very accurate and very poignant when you think of the enabling environment and the importance of working with our governments as well to ensure that where that capital is going, the governments are ready. So I'd like to know, Mr. Moses, from ATIDI's perspective, how are you supporting member states in being able to do that?
So thank you very much. I think our intervention is, of course, encouraging governments to say, make some reforms that allow, business environment to be stable and attracting investors. Once you do that, make it clear, and says, no, this was unfair, this was lopsided, it was one-sided, you should not have gotten these incentives. Where do I go? That is the protection we provide. So we call that an insurable risk. We are trying to keep our governments honest. That's basically what we're trying to do. That's our lobby, that's our effort to tell governments, yes, we like your investment code, we like your promises. Investors are going to take you for your word, but they want the extra step of protection just in case. And that's where we come in. And I hope, and this is my appeal to the room, that all governments in here, please stick to your promises. Stick to your promises, because your promises, when they are broken, they result in claims on ATIDI. So far, you have been very excellent. You have been very, very good, because if you were not excellent in protecting us, we would be bankrupt through claims. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moses. Your Excellency, I'm turning my attention to you. Kenya's experience is not just about Kenya, but it's also giving us lessons for the wider continent. I'd like to know what lessons you view that can be extrapolated from your own experience in aiming to spur industrialization across the continent.
The lessons that we are learning, and I'm sure it's the same for many other peers in the continent. One is that we are the architects of our own destiny, and that at the center of that destiny is the empowerment of the citizen, especially economic empowerment. And for that to happen, business, investment, and wealth creation is extremely important. And how that wealth is shared is also important, so that we reduce the number of fellow citizens who are in the other, like extreme phase of need. So we need to look at wealth creation, not in terms of the quantum, but also in the distribution of the wealth among the citizens. Number two, or thirdly, really, the lesson that we have learned is that many of the political challenges that we face as Kenya and as Africa can be mitigated by a robust economic program that responds to the economic needs of the people. Many of the political challenges are actually as a result of economic imbalances and needs, and the way the national wealth is distributed. And maybe finally is that we must believe in ourselves. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody will. That applies to this continent, that we must believe in ourselves before we start asking other people to believe in ourselves. For us, those are the key things. It's about putting the economic empowerment at the forefront, and that empowerment becoming inclusive, carrying on board as many people as possible across generations, across gender, and making sure that we have a strong belief in ourselves, in our country, in our continent, before we start asking other people to believe in us.
I think we can give the Deputy President a round of applause. Now, at this point, I would like to open up the conversation to the audience. We've heard from Kenya's industrial priorities. We've heard of the NAFAD plans, the AFDB's investments into ATIDI, as well as the role of risk mitigation and the great work that ATIDI is doing. I'd like now to invite questions from the audience. Please do keep your questions brief and to the point. Et en français, à ce stade, j'aimerais ouvrir la conversation à la salle. Si vous pouvez garder votre question très brève. You can just raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question to either one of our distinguished panelists. And we also have one here at the front from President Admasu.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and a very good morning to the distinguished panel. Just a very brief question, because we here in Nairobi and elsewhere in the continent have been hearing a lot of pleas to the global stakeholders around the global financial architecture. And I think now that we're showing some credibility at home by driving charity at home, as they say, it begins at home. Do you think now, with the momentum we have in the continent on our own front, that we might be heard a little bit better globally? Maybe Dr. Sidi, but anybody who feels they could.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question. So I do believe that the recent summit in Nairobi, the Africa Forward Summit, was a starting point for Africa to make its voice heard outside the continent, particularly with regard to the new African financial architecture for development. And President Ruto and President Macron took this message to the G7. And recently we had this opportunity, and African Development Bank has been invited to attend the Leaders Summit in Evian. And that was a great opportunity for us to submit our vision of the new African financial architecture for development, but also what we expect from non-African partners, and particularly the G7, but also the OECD and other partners, how we can really strengthen the partnership with them, and particularly in the area of supporting ATIDI and supporting NAFAD in general. So what we came up with from the Evian Summit is very clear, and it has been also clearly mentioned in the communique of the summit, where ATIDI and NAFAD have been really mentioned very clearly and endorsed by the leaders of the G7. So we are quite optimistic that in the coming months and coming years, the voice of Africa will be better heard on the international arena.
Excellent.
Just to add that I agree with what the President has said, that the push for reform for the global financial architecture, and generally the push for reform on all the other aspects of global multilateralism, is beginning to yield fruits, and I'm very hopeful, and Kenya believes that that effort is not in vain, because, as they say, once you write and tell your own story, it is very difficult to be ignored. Because I have heard a proverb that before the lion learned to tell its story, the story always glorified the hunter. So we have learned to tell our story. And we are telling it not in words, we are telling it in doing. For example, what we are doing here today, celebrating 25 years of positive move towards financial freedom for this continent. So we are on course, and I believe the effort is worth the while. And I want to encourage the leadership of our continent to remain focused and put their feet on the pedal until we reach there. It is possible.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I have time for one more question. I have a gentleman here.
Your Excellency, Professor Kindiki, my name is Moses Tigomurugendo Tahobari. I'm from Uganda. Your Excellency, you have emphasized policy continuity as a key driver of investor confidence. What institutional mechanisms is Kenya putting in place to ensure that major infrastructure and industrial policies remain stable across changes in political administrations? And what lessons can other African countries learn from Kenya's experience? And to President Dr. Sidi, Mr. President, the new African financial and development architecture is indeed an inspiring vision. What are the 3 top reforms that African countries should implement immediately to personalize this architecture and mobilize more capital for African development? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
In the interest of time, I'll mention just two things. One is, I think the drive ought to be towards strengthening institutions. Because for some time, part of the reason why we've had a lot of policy disruption is because of weak constitutional institutions. So we are investing in strengthening institutions, the judiciary, parliament, all other institutions, including local government institutions, so that they can withstand changes in human resources. Because you can have a good leader, but if the institutions are weak and somebody else who is not as good comes on board, then the entire program, the entire policy program will collapse. So investing in institutions is key. Number 2, and lastly, is in terms of political mobilization, we must also move towards mobilizing our political engagement around political parties, and those political parties must be increasingly be led through ideological and policy positions as opposed to sectarian, religious, ethnic, and other forms of mobilization. That way you are assured that and even when we have political party ideological differences, we must go on and agree what are the fundamentals which must be acceptable across the political divide. Doesn't matter whether you're in government or in the opposition, there are certain things that underwrite a country's stability and vision. Those ones cannot be undermined. We can disagree on the secondary and the tertiary issues, but there are certain basic fundamentals that must be agreed by all political parties. If we invest in ideology-based politics and invest in institutions, you're going to have long-term policy programs that do not get disrupted because of a change of government. For example, I would be keen to hear from a political party that does not believe that trade and logistics is important towards an industrialization ambition of any country. I would like to hear if there is such a political party that doesn't value trade, logistics, roads, ports, railways, and harbors. That is one. Number two, I would like to hear if there is any political party canvassing for power that does not believe that you cannot move into an industrialized country without addressing the productivity of the primary sector. Okay? You must handle agriculture and manufacturing. And of course, the associated enablers before you start advancing into services and other sectors of the economy. So we need to invest in strong institutions, and secondly, agree on basic fundamentals that whether this party wins or the other party wins, those ones do not change, but a party can have priorities which are reorganized at secondary and tertiary levels. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. In the interest of time, I will take this as your closing statement. We won't be in a position to tackle the tail end of that question, but I do want to thank all of my panelists. I'm sure that question will be tackled in some of the later sessions. Thank you, firstly, to our Deputy President for your presence here, for your poignant remarks, and for really painting a picture of where Kenya is headed in terms of the priorities and the mechanisms and assurances that you're putting in place. We applaud you. Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. President, thank you so much for your presence here and for sharing more specifics in terms of NAFAD and the ambitious plan that you have for our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for President Ta. And Mr. Moses, our CEO, thank you so much for giving us more enlightenment as to what exactly is the impact and the mechanisms and especially the vision that you have for ATIDI 2.0. We applaud you. Ladies and gentlemen, another big round of applause for our leaders panel. Thank you so much, Your Excellencies. Thank you.
You've done a good job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are we acquitted?
We would like to invite you for a group photo. If you may remain on stage just 2 minutes. And I'd like to call back the speakers that we had during the opening, as well as Deputy Chair, our Chair for ATD, the representative cabinet secretaries, President Ta, the CEO, and His Excellency Erastus Mwenche for the group photo. Thank you very much. A round of applause. We would like to announce the Kenyan national anthem and thank once again our Deputy President. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause as our Deputy President exits the room. Once again, thank you for your presence here, Your Excellency. We'd like to invite you all to remain in the room.